Hi there everybody, it is Poober here for episode 34 of my Factorio series. In episode 33, I showcased the new 5,000 science per minute factories that I have designed. But what that means for episode 34 is I've got to add even more room for those very massive factories and all of the subcomponents that are going to be required. So what I'm planning on doing is adding in probably about 4 more new Octagons yet again. Quite a long time later, and I now have 4 new Octagons installed. Basically, one new one to each corner, so one over here to the top left, top right, and bottom left. The bottom left one is the only one now where I'm missing the landfill inside, but the bottom right and the top right took basically a ton of landfill. So I'm glad these two are done. So that will be the hard part done. The easy part will be getting this section done, which won't be a big deal. But I'm actually starting here in this Octagon, which is the middle far left one, because this is where I'm planning on installing my new red and green science factories and probably military science factory in this one over here as well. But first things first, I have to get rid of this oil pump setup, so I'm going to go ahead and demolish this, which pains me to do, but it has to be done. Alright, I am working with an empty slate yet again with this entire Octagon now empty. I'll have to move some oil pump stations somewhere else. We've got a couple other places we can tap into. In fact, I've labeled a couple ore patches I've found recently that I want to tap into eventually. This one here is a 75 million copper ore patch, and this one is a 37 million iron patch, which I'll definitely be using. But for now, I'm kind of hesitating on adding in any new ore patches because they aren't needed at this point. But once I get all of the 5,000 science up and running, I will definitely need to get into all of those additional ore patches. But for now, I'm going to worry about adding in the new red, green, and military science factories to this Octagon like I mentioned earlier. Now, I talked about the blueprints for these science factories in the previous episode, so if you haven't seen that, you can check it out by clicking in the upper right-hand corner over here. But the hardest part wasn't actually designing the blueprints. The hardest part is designing how I'm going to be fitting in those factories along with all the train stations and the stackers and all of the other subcomponents, the belts and so on. Basically all of the logistics that go into making the factory work in a vanilla map, which is for the most part what this map is. I finally come up with a solution, I think, though, for the most part, in terms of at least my red, green, and military science. And I'll show you those blueprints here. This is the red and green science factory setup. What I did was took a big blueprint of my rail setup to ensure that when I took it over to my creative world, I had the exact footprint, basically, of my rail grid, so I knew exactly how much room I had to play with. And then from there, I kind of took some components that I've been using around the base, like this train stacker here, which has been pretty common throughout my other factories. And so I started basically working with elements I have been using and then adding in the factories where I could and coming up with the design that worked. This one up here to the top is the red science factory. This one here to the bottom is for the green. And then we have the same parallel rail tracks that go in the middle, just like I have for basically all of my other Octagons for either input or easy output of my trains. So the next thing will just be to place this down and make sure it overlaps correctly. And then we'll talk about the military science. Here's the blueprinted version of the military science, and this is ultimately, I think, probably the harder ones to get logistically figured out because it has so many subcomponents going into every component. For instance, here is the military science factory in the middle. These are just the assemblers and beacons going for the direct production of the actual military science packs themselves. Above that, though, I have ammo production up here. This one here to the right is for the basic ammo. It feeds into the piercing ammo over here, and then that gets fed from the top, going from the top into the science packs. And then over here at the bottom, I have a mixture of the grenades and gun turrets getting produced here. And then we have a weird train stacker setup where these will kind of crisscross. And then I have a bunch of train stations here delivering all of the other products. So logistically, this was more of a nightmare to get figured out because there are so many moving parts, basically. But after a bunch of hours working on this, I think this will work, and according to my calculations in the creative map, this will produce over 5,000 per minute along with red and green science for the other blueprint as well. So I've done as much research and as much planning as I possibly can do, so at this point all I have left to do is place it and just hope everything works as it did in my creative world. Several hours and one live stream later, all of the factories are now fully installed. I even ended up installing an additional factory. I wasn't even planning on it. It is this iron gear wheel factory here. And this is solely to supply the gun turrets which are required for the military ammo, so I'll talk about this in just a second. But to start off with, let's do a brief tour of the military section and then I'll show you what you missed during the live stream. We'll start in order of the sciences, starting with red science. This is the one up here to the top left of the octagon. We start by having a train stacker where it comes off of the main line directly and into this, I think it's a 12 stacker or something like that here. And then I have a couple different lanes for the trains to come into. Now this stacker should hold different trains worth of copper plate and iron plate. But we have those branch off, so this is the lane here for the iron plate. The one over here to the bottom is for the copper. And then we have at the train station to the bottom the actual pickup of the red science with this train here. I have two additional train tracks just north of the iron plate drop-off. The one in the middle is basically a pass-through track, so if I wanted to redirect trains or have it go through, it can. And then the one up here to the very top is for a personal vehicle, so that way I can redirect my personal train to come here if needed. I also made sure to add in extra room for a fuel train. So I actually have this train stop here, which even though it's right in the middle of one of the output train tracks, it's only going to be here for 5 seconds at a time. So it's just brief enough to not really bother the output of the trains going back onto the main rail network. Now moving on to green science, that is this factory here just below the red. We also have two additional train stackers over here coming off of the main rail network. And then this odd-shaped one here, kind of in the middle of the two bigger ones, is for my personal drop-off for the green science, so that's where my personal train will go here. And then these stackers will hold different trains as well. We've got green circuits that will be coming in, as well as my iron plate that will be coming in through this station here. The iron plate takes a 2-4-2 train, while the green circuits just require a 2-wagon train. Finally, the green science packs make their way all the way from the bottom up to the top and then into this train station here, where this will eventually have somewhere to go, although it doesn't for now, but eventually we'll have a 5,000 science pack per minute lab setup. And then there is military science. Now, this is the one that gave me the biggest headache because there are so many subcomponents, as I've talked about from the beginning of this episode as well as in last episode. But we will start from the top just to make it easy. So from the top is where we have the trains that will be exiting from the main rail network, and then they'll be coming onto this line here. Now this train track will only be for some of the items that will be going into the very bottom of the factory, oddly enough. How this works is it feeds into this train stacker here, and then the trains in this stacker will wait their turn, and then they will make their way all the way to the bottom, where we have train stations for copper plate over here, and then iron plate and iron gear wheels over here to the left. Now we have a similar situation coming here from the bottom, and instead of going up to the bottom over here, these continue on and into this train stacker. The trains in this stacker will also wait their turn but continue along into these lines over here. Now this one is for the military science pack pickup, but the other trains used for product supply of the factory are going to be feeding into these stations up here. This one to the far right is for iron plate, this one here in the middle is for steel, and then to the very far left is for copper plate. So that is how that is divvied up, and then the products for the regular ammo get fed via belt, going underground and then meeting up with the steel products, and then the copper plate joins up with those products to make the piercing ammo, which we have then feeding down and then feeding all of the columns of the military science from top to bottom. As for the bottom portion of the factory, we have components for the grenades over here to the right and then gun turrets over here to the left. In total, though, I think this can produce between 1.7 and 1.8 of the gun turrets and grenades per minute, which is just about what is required for the science packs in the military section. And that ratio is just what is required to produce the 5,000 plus science per minute of the military science packs. How I planned out the unloading stations for the grenades and the gun turrets is a little different. I've got 2 separate train stations for each side. So I've got basically one train station here for the coal and one over here to the bottom, and then this train station here is for iron plate along with the one on the bottom. And then similar situation over here to the left-hand side for the actual gun turrets, but instead of coal, we replace the coal with the iron gear wheels. Same with the top train stations as well. All of these products are fed via bot into the adjacent boxes nearby. We've got a couple different boxes for iron plate, and then iron gear wheels is just opposite of the Roboport. And then these products continue along via underground belts all the way extending to the ends of the rows. And then finally we have one more train stop here near the military section, and this one is for more fuel, which we have bot supply to all of these train stations over here. And then to show off the impromptu factory I ended up making during my live stream, this is the iron gear wheel factory. It can produce 18,000 iron gear wheels per minute, which was calculated because that is precisely the amount of iron gear wheels that it takes to supply the gun turrets for the 5,000 plus military science pack per minute. So the only reason why I ended up building it off-site was because I couldn't fit it adjacent to the military section. There just wasn't enough room. But the square just south of that provided a good spot for it, so this is where I ended up putting it and how I came up with the design. I basically have this square cut in half, where the bottom half is devoted to stackers of some kind. The bigger stacker is for the 2 forward 2 trains of the iron plate. The smaller stacker is for the actual trains coming in to pick up the iron gear wheels itself. And that leaves the last thing to do, which is to turn everything on. But before we do that, here are a couple things you missed during the live stream. Got the blueprints ready to go, so it's just a matter of placing it down. Alright, looks like that's where it's gonna go. Get rid of that crap there. Alright, this is probably gonna take a while to build. I don't have full bot construction coverage over here, so I'm going to add a couple robo bays. I might as well place down the military blueprint as well, I guess. Where is that? Oh, right here. Okay. And same principle, I took a big blueprint of my rail grid and brought it over to my creative map, and that way I could be sure that I had precisely knowledge of exactly how much room I had to play with. Okay, that looks lined up to me. There we go. That'll do it. Science blueprints installed, or at least placed. Now I just have to wait for everything to actually get placed down by the bots and help them out when I can. Okay, now we can start burning this stuff up and get rid of what we can. Look at all the bots! Oh no! These are actually working. I don't want them to work yet. Oh no. Bots are bringing the materials all the way from my main base. That is not what I want. Shoot. So that leaves one last thing to do, which is to actually turn on all of the trains. So I've got all of the trains ready to go in stations. They're all fueled. We just have to set them to automatic and get them picking up the resources. So let's go ahead and do that now. Starting with red. And then we'll do green next. Oh, that's the science pack pickup, so that one will have nowhere to go. but this one will. This one is going to go pick up the green circuits next. This one's going to go pick up the iron plate. And then we can start the military science trains. This one will be a little bit more complicated and they have a little bit further distance to go. That one's already set to automatic along with that one as well. But the coal and the iron plate for the grenades we do have to turn on for sure. I've even got a couple over here in the stacker. Eventually we'll add even more trains to the system, but this is just enough to kind of get us started. Let's see, are those automatic? Yes. But these, I think, are the last ones. A nice thing of turning everything on at the same time is getting able to see how the rail signaling works in practice, making sure we don't get any crashes or anything like that. But I'm hoping in just a minute we'll be able to see these factories in action. Here is the red science factory now for the first time working. Just for the heck of it, let's take a look at the production statistics. Here we are at 1.7 thousand per minute. And as I said in the live stream, I know we're not going to hit the 5,000 per minute goal at this point because we're just not getting enough throughput of the trains consistently with all of the materials required. But it's nice to see it actually working because whether this is 5,000 or 2,000, it's technically still better than what my current science pack production rate is with just my very primitive mid-game science pack setup. So this is still much better than nothing and much better than what I currently have. How about the green science though? Is that getting turned on yet? We've got the circuit drop off, but it looks like we're waiting for the iron plate train. And I'm guessing that is on its way or is possibly this train here. And then how about the military? Military, we've got the iron plate unloading. We don't yet have a coal train coming drop off stuff. But here's the iron plate coming in for the green science factory. We're seeing the iron plate go through the iron gear wheel section first, and then it makes its way down into the inserter section, and then finally those products get into the green science assemblers. Any minute now, most of these will start turning on, I would imagine. And some of them are. Looks like it's taking a minute though to get these up and running. And that's because we're missing the belts actually. So I always forget the belts are actually produced on the corners. And so even though the green science assemblers come first before the belts are at the end, and so it kind of takes a minute for this to warm up fully. But it looks like it is now getting going. At least these ones here at the end are starting to work. It'll take a minute, I think, before the middle to the left green science pack assemblers really get going. What's the production rate on that, just for science? Oh, so we're at 1,000 per minute, 1,000 plus. In fact, we're at over 1,000 for the 3 sciences at this point, even 1.5 for the military, which it looks like that has to be turned on. Let's take a look at that right now. Yes, it is working. So the gun turrets were already turned on from my work during the live stream, getting the copper plate trains and the iron gear wheels and the iron plate set up to it, but we were still waiting for the grenades to get turned on, which they are kind of. It looks like I am definitely missing some coal. We're not getting enough throughput of the coal trains, but as we saw in the production statistics, it is working. Here's the upper ammo portion, which is working just fine, it looks like. And how are my overall production rates? Let's get rid of the stuff we don't need. So in total, with everything turned on, it looks like my average per minute is with the high at the red science packs. That's at 3.1 thousand per minute. Green and military have a ways to go before they're going to hit that, let alone hit 5,000 per minute. But I am really pleased with it. I know this is a good sign because with improving the throughput of my trains, I should be able to get up to the 5,000 per minute goal. So I think with that, we're going to go ahead and end it here. Hope you guys are satisfied with the progress as I am and you enjoyed the video. If you guys would like to join me for a future live stream, don't forget to follow me on Twitch or on Twitter for the updates on that. But for now, we're going to call it with episode 34, and I hope you'll stick around for episode 35 and more progress to come.